Thank you for joining the conversation
Pleasure.
today. Um, I've been looking forward to this because I'm a marketer, right? So this topic is very dear to my heart, and I know that a lot of our customers and audience will find it very valuable, the tips that you're going to share today. So thank you for honoring our invitation to join the show, and I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. This is my favorite topic as well. So I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you. So can you just introduce yourself to us? What do you do? Who are you? Would like to meet you, at least for those who don't know you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in entrepreneurship. I got started pretty young. My whole family has been entrepreneurial. So I've run a variety of different businesses from, I started in retail furniture, and which is my family's business, and we did quick serve food, and we ran fitness facilities, consulting businesses, and I got involved in the accounting space about. About 2018. Prior to that, I'd done a lot of business development and revenue operations work in software technology, consulting services, and things like that. I'm well versed in business development and revenue operations programs for accounting firms. This year, I started a firm called Ledgr. And Ledgr is a subscription cloud accounting company, focuses on bookkeeping, corporate accounting, business services, back office services. We do fractional chief revenue officer services. We do fractional CFO services. So it's definitely, this is a space I'm really immersed in and thinking about every day.
Wow, that's quite a journey. You moved from being a founder at a SaaS company, I believe, being a chief revenue officer, working with SaaS companies, to building, launching your own bookkeeping firm. So that's really interesting. Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a
So,
lot of fun.
I mean, I can imagine. Before we go into the conversation, I'm seeing something on your shelf. Can you tell us about it? Looks interesting. The
Absolutely. Which thing?
the face. I'm trying to the sculpted face.
Absolutely. So I've got a Buddha,
Okay.
and I've got a and I love my Buddha head back there, because that reminds me to stay present and keep focused on what's going on right now, which can be a million distractions every day.
Yeah.
I'm not a Buddhist, but I'm curious, and
Wow.
I am fascinated by different philosophies and different religions and things like that. And so Buddha is the perfect addition to my little bookshelf over there. A
That-
handful of books that I have read, and a handful of books that I hope to get around to reading, and everything in between.
that's interesting. I mean, very catchy. So I can imagine that every time you start a call, someone talks about that.
That's right. That's right. They're Buddha is keeping an eye on the conversation, making sure I don't miss anything.
Okay, all right. So, for everyone joining us, I'm Tosin. I work with Financial Sense. Financial Sense is a SaaS company by work management solutions specifically for accountants and bookkeepers. So we are the software solution that firms use to get work done. To track your deadlines, meet your deadlines, collaborate with your staff, organize client information. That's Financial Sense. So welcome to Firm Founders. We have this show every 2 weeks where we interview amazing people, experts in their field on different topics that firm founders will find valuable and interesting. So this is something we do every 2 weeks. However, because we are going into the holiday season, we're not going to have any firm founders live in December. The next one will be in January, and we already have a list of amazing guests that will join us to discuss important topics. Again, welcome here, and I'm going to go straight into the questions I have for you around lead generation strategies for accounting firms. So let's start with the most basic question, right? What is lead generation? I mean, I feel like if I ask anybody this question, they're going to have an answer, right? They're going to say something. So, as someone who knows, this is your field, this is something you do, how would you define lead generation?
So, to me, when I think about lead generation, I'd like to think about what a lead is. And so a lead's a person who has the potential to become a client at some point. And so when I think about that, lead generation, I think is best defined as a way of making new prospective clients aware of your offerings in an effort to sign on new business. And so it's probably helpful for me to describe some of the terminology that I use when I'm talking about leads and lead
Yeah.
generation. And so one of the terms that I'll use is, a basic or early lead, I'll refer to as a suspect. And so a suspect is somebody that I suspect might be a good lead, right? And a suspect is a type of lead, but somebody who's gone through I have no real reason to believe there's a real opportunity there. They're just somebody who, from my perspective, might fit the mold of what a client looks like. And so any person that you come into contact, any person whose contact information you have, and
Yeah.
theoretically could be a customer, is a suspect. Somebody who has the ability to make a buying decision. And essentially, almost anyone you could contact is a lead by this definition. So you want as many of these as possible, but they're not going to be bread and butter. It's just a starting point. So that's a suspect. The second term that I'll use is a prospect. And a prospect is a lead that you've been in touch with or who has been in touch with you. So if somebody fills out a web form on your website, that's a prospect. If you cold outreach to somebody, pick up the phone and cold call someone, and you get them on the phone and you have a conversation, that's a prospect. So prospect involves some form of communication, some form of connection. And then the next layer of a lead is a qualified prospect. And so I use this term to address somebody who it's prospect, they've been screened, they meet the criteria to be a likely buyer, and they have the capacity, meaning they can afford what you're selling. They have a need, so there's some unmet need that your product or service can actually fix, address, or improve. And they have the desire. So for some reason, they're seriously considering a change of accounting firms in this case, right? So that's a qualified prospect. And so all of these terms, suspect, prospect, and qualified prospect, are technically leads, but they have very different meanings throughout the lead cycle. And so the next stage would, of course, be a client, right? After you're done being a lead, you either become a client. So for any firm or individual that wants to grow their clientele, having some form of lead generation strategy, bringing it back to your original question, what's lead generation? It's imperative. You got to have some sort of strategy. And the strategy could be as simple as setting up a website or even asking clients for word of mouth referrals, right? Those are all leads. Or it could be as complex as hiring a lead generation team or a consultant or engaging in outbound outreach, which would literally involve things like cold calling, cold email, or even knocking on doors the old-fashioned way.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of information. Thank you. Thank you for that. I was taking notes as you spoke. So thank you. So for those joining us, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the chat box, and your questions will be answered. All right. So you've explained what lead generation is, who a lead is, a prospect, a suspect, and a qualified prospect, and then a client. Now, for accounting firms or accounting firm owners, how should they think about lead generation?
Yeah, so I think first it's important that you assess what your growth goals are.
Yeah.
So, does your firm want to bring in 10 to 15 new clients a year? Is it more about revenue and bigger deals than it is about more quantity of clients? Or are you trying to double in size, either in employees or revenue, right? So like these strategies are going to look different. And, if you were to say you want to double in size, you should be prepared to put a lot of thought and strategy into lead generation planning, because everything starts with leads. You need a lot of conversations to qualify enough of the right prospects to hit the goal of doubling your clientele in a year. And so you may have other obstacles in your sales process to overcome, things like articulating your value proposition, and a large number of leads is the only way to give your team the practice to figure those things out. So you want the volume so high that you can essentially stink at sales and still have enough practice to get better at sales, assuming that the goal is of doubling in clients is important to you. And you'll also find that the way in which you acquire leads, the different ways that you manage a lead generation strategy or different components of your lead generation strategy, they will yield different results in terms of how you need to manage the conversations to bring those suspects into prospects and into qualified prospects and into a closed client. So, you take something like an inbound lead, somebody fills out a form on your website, that process usually moves rather quickly. They've pre-qualified themselves by reviewing your website, and they've expressed an interest, right? They've done a lot of that work for you. If you cold call someone and you are lucky or skilled enough to get them to agree to a more meaningful conversation with you, you have to do that qualification work yourself. So that requires a more robust sales process as a whole. And you've got to be aware of that when you're doing lead generation. So that's something to think about. If the strategy is double in size, if you're looking for a steady rate of growth, that's great. You can probably get away with a less aggressive strategy, something that feeds a manageable volume of leads into the pipeline. So it's important to be in tune to the different closing ratios that a referral will have versus somebody who was done through cold calling or cold email or one of those types of colder outreach strategies. So always be prepared to study the numbers in your lead generation process. You need to know how many leads convert into how many prospects, how many prospects convert into how many qualified prospects, and how many qualified prospects it takes to make a sale. And so if you can get those vital KPIs down, that'll tell you how many leads you need to pour into the top of the funnel, and ultimately which strategies are best for you to achieve the growth goal that is being driven by this lead generation strategy.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess my next question is, most accounting firms are quite, I won't say small, but they're like mid-sized, and most times the firm owner is the one doing everything, including marketing. So how should, you've talked about knowing the numbers and all that. Can you run us through, how an accounting firm owner should go about doing lead generation, for their firm? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So lead generation can be a lot of work, and so this is probably a good place to talk about some of the specific strategies of lead generation. So I put lead generation into two basic buckets, and I think this is a helpful way to think about things: inbound lead generation and outbound lead generation. And so a lot of people who think that it's overwhelming, a small firm who thinks it's overwhelming to do a high volume of lead generation, they're probably thinking of the wrong strategy, or they've tried the wrong strategies. Inbound strategies are going to be things like social media, content marketing, running an informative podcast, or hosting a live session like this. Maybe it's writing a blog. Maybe it's something you do in partnership with somebody else. And then you're going to have paid inbound, which is going to be pay-per-click ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn, Google, etc. Even a newspaper or a print ad, right, is going to be that type of paid inbound leads. And so inbound is all about getting leads to find you and express interest. And so when you have this type of lead generation going, this inbound lead generation, the sales cycle is a lot easier with an inbound lead because they're already pre-qualifying themselves to an extent. You're never really talking to suspects or many prospects. They almost always come through the door with some level of qualification. for the most part. And so getting these guys to close this way easier because we've already filtered out all the tire kickers or the price shoppers or people who didn't know what you wanted to meet about, which is a common thing with cold lead generation, right? You're looking to have these meaningful conversations, but sometimes they think the conversation is going to be something different than it actually is. And so inbound is a very low friction and can be a very low maintenance way to run a lead generation strategy. You can either throw money at it with pay-per-click stuff, or you can throw some content generation effort into it or publicity effort into it to drive traffic to the website to complete that inbound process. Outbound prospecting is substantially more work, and it requires a better understanding of a consultative sales process. So kind of back to what I was talking about those sales cycles looking different. When you're talking about cold calling, cold email, LinkedIn messages, banging on doors, this stuff takes a lot of grit, first of all. It takes seriously thick skin because of the volume of rejection that you have to confront to actually be successful in those strategies. The volumes need to be much higher. You're likely to be in front of buyers during earlier stages of their consideration. And so some meetings will not even know what you're selling before the call or consultation, you know, whatever your sales process looks like, whether it's a call, consultation, a form, or whatever it is. And so because of this, conversations to clients, the ratio will be a lot lower because you'll have to make suspects prospects and you'll have to qualify prospects. And so most people hear that and kind of say, okay, well, I'm only going to do inbound, and outbound sounds like a waste of time. And if you're trying to sell without a dedicated sales team and you don't need to bring in a ton of business, then I would probably say, yeah, you're right. Stick with inbound. It's a lot lower maintenance. The challenge with inbound is, aside from spending more money or tweaking your call to actions can kind of have a minimal effect, the language in the ads you use, you don't have as much control over the lead volume that you're going to get from inbound. And the spend can get really expensive. And that's essentially one of the only things you can do to drive that volume up. And so from my experience, after a little testing, outbound has a very predictable flow of leads. And once you get the numbers of conversion understood, you can essentially increase the business that flows into your company like a throttle on an engine. And that's a really sweet place to be, right? You just say, hey, I want more clients. This is the activity that needs to take place to get that. Whereas with inbound, you're leaving a lot more up to chance and to ad spend and to conversion ratios maintaining the same. And so firms who really want to grow, they should essentially be doing both, right? They probably even need a dedicated team for inbound and outbound sales processes. But for somebody who just feels like, hey, we're too small, we want a steady rate of growth, lead generation feels like too much work, you can put together a very automated inbound lead generation campaign and essentially let the prospects come to you pre-qualified and have meaningful conversations less frequently and generate a fair amount of business from that.
So thank you. So how do you do that? Can you give some examples? Because off the top of my head, I'm thinking, okay, maybe on their website they have a form with questions, to help qualify leads, and so that they're able to know if this is a qualified lead or just someone shopping around. So can you share some examples of how to actually do that?
Yes. So I subscribe to a sales philosophy, and it's this idea, and it's part of the reason why I love business development and revenue operations. When you're a salesperson or you're acting in a sales capacity for your business, let's say you're a business owner, you're selling for yourself, sales is the one opportunity you have to give all the value you can give for no cost, right? For no exchange of money. And the idea here is that you're going to give as much value as humanly possible without money changing hands. And so for me, that's always been really rewarding because I like to help people, and it's a great way to help people. So specific strategies, on the inbound side, I found the most success in finding things of value that require some exchange of information to receive. And so, for example, let's say you're a CPA firm and you do, cost segregation work. You may have some really valuable real estate tax strategies to share. And so, maybe it's a free meeting with a cost segregation expert. Maybe it's an article you wrote that gave away, some secrets that can really benefit people. Maybe it's a white paper or something like that. If you can find something of value to offer for free on your website, that's a really great lead generation strategy, right? There's going to be a catch. The catch is that they have to give you a name and an email address to download it or book the meeting, right? And so this way you're qualifying your prospects with the content that they're interested in. So for example, if they're seeking real estate strategies, they probably need your services as a cost segregation expert, and therefore you're sort of pre-qualifying them and delivering value at the same time for no cost other than the information they share with you. And so they're also indicating that they're probably not getting what they need from their current CPA if they have one, right? Because they're seeking more information. So that's another qualifier that you've done. And they obviously have a desire to make an improvement to their situation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reading that content, spending the time on it, researching it. And so, sort of keeping that in mind, the value of you during the sales process, lead generation process, is to give solid value for no charge. You want them thinking, if this is what I get for free, imagine how good it gets when I cut a check, right? Imagine how good it gets when I'm a client. And you can you can get the same idea accomplished with webinars, collect email addresses in exchange for content that pre-qualifies the attendees. Pay-per-click ads can be more direct, right? You can actually try to hook or sell your services with an offering. But you will get more opportunities if you use a call to action like what I described here, right? Where you're offering something of value free of charge, and then you're using that to curate the leads and to work those leads into your ecosystem and move them through the sales process. So those are some specific strategies you can apply to an accounting business. And a lot of that is set it and forget it. A lot of it is put the content on the website, advertise it, and let people download it at will, and then follow up with the ones who downloaded it. And that follow-up is going to be pre-qualified people to a large extent, right? The follow-ups can be asking for calls after that. On the outbound strategy side, the strategies that work well are the classics, right? They're not fun, they're brutal. You face a lot of rejection, but cold calling still works. Cold email works great, although you have to manage cold emailing really carefully to avoid spam filters and things like that, blocking your domain and blacklisting you. So that requires maybe a little more sophistication on the email side. Networking through groups like BNI, Chamber of Commerce, Business Leader Networks, any network that speaks to your niche, right? If, use the real estate example I used a moment ago. If you can become a member of a real estate association, that's really productive. Those strategies still work, but because the volumes need to be so high for you to do outbound lead generation, I can't emphasize that point of expecting lots of rejection enough, right? So the goal is never to sell on the spot when you're doing that, right? The biggest mistake people use in outbound sales strategies or in networking is to immediately start pitching their services or their offering. That's not a productive way, and it's important to separate your lead generation strategy from your sales strategy, right? The goal in the lead generation stage is to get them to be a lead, to get them to be a qualified prospect. And so, book a meeting and bring them into your consultative sales process. And that process almost always requires a near, if not more than full-time effort. And so for most outbound processes, it's realistic. If you have your consultative selling down well, expect to talk to 2,500 people, get about 10 meetings from that, and close 1 to 2 clients, right? It's a huge trickle down. So you got to be able to put the work in to do the volume. But if your sales strategy is not solid or consultative enough, or you spend too much time pitching before you understand the prospect or have qualified the prospect for asking the right questions, those numbers are going to skew pretty greatly. So the same is true if you're a killer salesperson and you really know how to understand implicit needs and tie it back to your value proposition, right? You may find you can generate more leads more quickly and close more clients off of fewer qualified prospects. So all those numbers have some play in it depending on where you're strong or weak in the rest of the sales process.
Amazing. I think you've actually answered my next question, which was supposed to be, what are some effective lead generation strategies for accounting firms? You've actually talked a lot about, that. So that's great. Thank you. So my question then is, you talked about inbound and outbound and how outbound can be very frustrating, cold calling, cold emailing, and all that. Those take a lot of work. They take a lot of work, and the results are usually not as great as you'd actually want them to be. So, my
Yes.
question is, what do you think? Do you advise accounting firm owners to outsource lead generation, or do you think they should do it internally by themselves? What's what do you think?
So that's a really great question and kind of an important thing to evaluate because there's pros and cons to both ends.
Yeah.
Um, Generally, I recommend outsourcing inbound strategies, right? Unless you're a large firm and you can afford a chief marketing officer, there's a number of digital marketing consultancies. In fact, there's a very high number of digital marketing consultancies right now in our
All over the world.
right, in our business environment.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, if not many of them, right, they know how to execute a high yield inbound strategy better than you will likely ever be able to educate yourself on in a short period of time. There's a lot of nuances, and so I recommend tapping into their knowledge for a few $1,000s a month rather than trying to learn all the ins and outs yourself. Right? If you outsource it, it can truly be a hands-off process. They can build the pay-per-click ads, the landing pages, do the Google Analytics for you to help you understand what's working and what's not, make specific recommendations on how to improve the strategy. I've worked with a handful of these firms myself for my businesses, and I'm yet to have like a truly unproductive experience. It can be expensive if you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of ad spend. But there are very specific ways to run an effective inbound strategy that work, and a lot of consultancies can help. For outbound strategies, it's usually best to have someone full-time in-house,
Mm,
or at least the equivalent of a full-time employee or two if you choose to outsource. Because there are some outsourcing solutions that will do a really good job and will learn enough about the uniqueness of your business to be effective in outbound. But it
yeah.
is truly a huge commitment of time and effort. And it's helpful if you have someone who knows the nuances of your prospect qualifications, right? They know who's a good fit for your business. And so to hit the numbers, they really have to be committed to the process, right? We talked about those numbers a little bit earlier. It's a lot. And so that said, you probably want to work with an experienced consultant to help establish the process with you for an outbound strategy if you're new to it. And a good consultant who's an expert in lead generation can shave a lot of expensive trial and error off of your research and development for lead generation, and they'll help you get results more quickly. And so I think there's a place for outsourcing on both the inbound and outbound side. But when it actually comes down to doing the work of banging on doors, picking up the phone and calling, you probably need a hunter on the payroll full time to be able to do the volume necessary to yield meaningful results.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you. I feel like when it comes to inbound, lead generation, it's first always better to have someone outsource it, just because I think, an effective and successful business owner wants to work on their business, not in the business. You don't want to be the one doing like the littlest of things. There are other parts of the business that you need to be able to focus on and have experts, focus on the other aspects. So I totally agree with you on that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so my last question, because we are rounding off now. My last question is, what should firm owners know when working with consultants? I mean, because we all know that if I don't understand what a consultant is working on, they throw all these big words and terminologies at me, and I'm like, okay, I really don't know. Okay, whatever you say, you can do it, and then maybe I'm not getting the kind of results I want because I don't know what I should know in relating with that consultant. So, based on what you just shared, what are, say, two or three things firm owners should know when working with consultants on lead generation strategies?
Absolutely. So I think a big one right off the bat is patience, right? All of these strategies require some ongoing commitment to curate a result. With outbound strategies, it's going to require a handful of failed attempts, right? I mentioned that rejection component a bunch of times, and to do 2,500 cold outreaches, hopes to get 10, 15, maybe 20 on the great side, successful conversations, productive conversations.
Yeah.
Um, that means you're gonna have to do a handful of outreaches where people say no, or maybe they say it in a harsher way, which has been my experience. Sometimes they do. Um, I do a handful of consulting work for one of my companies, and in the revenue operations space. And I always recommend looking at the process of new business development as a completely new project, right? As if you're brand new to it. When you have built an accounting firm, particularly an accounting firm that's achieved some level of success, there are a lot of, in fact, this is true about any business, not just accounting firms. There's a lot of preconceived ideas that you're going to hold into how you built the business to where it is and what worked for you. And sometimes overcommitting to those ideas can hold us back from realizing the full potential of a new strategy. And so a lot of businesses, particularly accounting firms, get frustrated when they feel like they've wasted time. And accounting firms they can often be maybe even a culture of billable hours, right? And
Yeah.
so you have that mentality going into a sales process. It can be frustrating because, again, that idea that sales gives its value, 100% of the value before money changes hands. You need to put yourself into a new space to remember that your job in sales and lead generation is to deliver value and ask for nothing in return, nothing but an opportunity. And if you have that sort of altruistic, attitude towards it, you'll yield better results. You'll contribute to more people's perceived value. You build better long-term relationships, and so you cannot go into each conversation if you've focused on a lead generation that doesn't involve a high volume of pre-qualification. Like, they were referred to me because they were actively looking for a new accounting firm, and one of my happy clients said, well, you should work with my guy. That
Yeah.
client's going to have a high closing ratio.
Yeah.
80% you're going to get that client. But if you focused on lead generation, and these people maybe they don't have an accountant, they've always done it themselves. Maybe they are working with somebody who they think is doing a good job, but they don't really know what to compare it to because they've never had another option.
Mm-hmm.
When you're going into those conversations, those are going to be hit or miss sometimes, right? You're going to have conversations where you just educate someone and they don't want to actually make a change. They just wanted to know more about the space. And so that's my biggest recommendation, is just keep in mind that none of these strategies uh, it's not healthy to go into any of these strategies with the expectation of better than 50% win rate. I usually, when I'm working with a client and they have a better than 50% win rate, I say, you're not charging enough, because you're obviously communicating better value than people are willing to pay for. So you want to fail a little, right? You want to be having enough conversations where not everybody is the ripest buyer, right? Some of them you're curating for a longer sales process, and that's okay.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. I think setting expectations right from the beginning, that's super important,
Absolutely.
because yeah, even generally speaking, in the industry, in your industry, there are always benchmarks in terms of like the average conversion rates for certain services and all that. So it's always good to just have a benchmark, or realistic expectations that guide your relationship with your consultants. So
Absolutely.
yeah. All right. Thank you very much. We've come to the end of the conversation, and I mean personally, I learned a lot. So I know that everyone will be watching this video after it's published on YouTube. They are going to get a lot of value out of it. Before I end the stream, do you have any last words? Anything you want to say about the topic or about yourself? How people can connect with you? Any of those things, please feel free to.
Absolutely. Well, I think one thing that's helpful to remember, because these strategies require a lot of effort. There are a lot of tools out there that can help people automate a huge amount of this, and I always say, because that first step requires so much volume of activity, right? That first outreach in any outbound campaign requires so much activity. The first stages of any lead generation process, inbound or outbound, they should be highly efficient and likely very automated. So tools like Zapier, HubSpot has a functionality called sequences if you're a HubSpot user. Tools like Growbots and Apollo, and these are email automation tools. You can automate a lot of the early stages of your prospecting, right? Of your outreach. And so Zoom Info is a great way to generate lead lists for cold calling and things like that. If you can become really efficient in the outreach, you can really shave down the amount of spinning your wheels you might end up doing if you're trying a broader cold outreach strategy. So that's another thing to keep in mind, and check out those tools and see if those are helpful. They may be helpful operationally as well, but they're definitely helpful from a business development and lead generation perspective. And then as far as connecting with me, I encourage anybody who's got other questions around the subject or just wants to connect or reach out, to find me on LinkedIn, Ian Bouchett, and reach out to me at ian@getledgr.co. Happy to answer questions. It's a topic I can talk for a long time about, as you can probably tell. So
Yeah.
I'm always happy to help.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ian. And again, I'm Tosin. I work with Financial Sense, a work management solution specifically for bookkeeping and accounting firms. Check us out on www.financialsense.com. We have a 14-day free trial for you to test it out and see if it's a good fit. But I think our reviews on G2 and Capterra will show you that we are going to be a good fit if what you are looking for is a workflow management solution to help you get work done, collaborate with your staff, organize clients' information, track your deadlines, and all that. So, again, thank you for joining, and I'll see you in January for the next Film Founders Live. Bye.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tosin.
Thank you.